In this video, we're going to look at testing a proportion. So our question reads, people who were born between 1978 and 1983 are sometimes classified by demographers as belonging to Generation Y. According to Forrester Research survey published in American Demographics, of 850 Generation Y web users, 459 reported using the internet to download music. And in Part A, it wants us to determine the sample proportion. And in Part B, it wants us at the 5% significance level, does the data provide sufficient evidence to conclude that the majority of Generation Y web users use the internet to download music? So here we're going to use a hypothesis test, and because it's a proportion test, we're going to use the Z distribution. And then it's going to be a right-tailed test because it says conclude that a majority, so it's going to be greater than. And the other important information we need from this problem is 459 was the amount that reported using internet to download music. Our N was 850, and we're using a 5% significance level. That's going to be important to us. And then the one thing that's not directly said in the problem, but because of the way they worded it, I guess it's understood, is provide sufficient evidence to conclude that a majority. So we're going to use pi, or our population proportion, is 0.5. So our H naught and our H1, and we're going to say that pi is greater than 0.5, or half would be majority, and then our null hypothesis is going to be pi is less than or equal to 0.5. And now we need to find our critical value, so Z crit, and here we have a right-tailed test, and we're 5% significance level, so one tail 5%, so we need to go to our tables. And here we can use the Z or the T table. My preference is to use the T table to go to one tail, over to 5%, and then all the way down to Z. So we have 1.645 is our critical value. And now we can say that we're going to reject H naught if zcalc is greater than 1.645. And now we need to find our zcalc. So zcalc is equal to p minus pi divided by the square root of pi 1 minus pi, all divided by n. And in Part A, they asked us to determine the sample proportion. That is P, and we would find that by doing the amount of people that reported using the internet divided by our N. So P is equal to 459 divided by 850. And that is equal to 0.54. So here for our zcalc, we have 0.54 minus 0.50 divided by the square root of 0.5 times 1 minus 0.5, or 0.5, divided by n, which is 850. And when we put this into our calculator, we find that it's 2.33 is our calculated value, or our test statistic. And because zcalc is greater than 1.645, we're going to reject H naught. And now we need to write a conclusion. And our conclusion is, at the 5% significance level, the data provides sufficient evidence to conclude that the majority of Generation Y web users use the internet to download music. And now, if they were to ask us the p-value, remember, because we're using Z, we can look this up. p-value is equal to, we go to our z-table, and we look up 2.33. So down the side to 2.3, and then over to 0.03, 0.9901. And so our p-value, remember that we are greater than, we are right-tailed, and our z-chart reads left, so we're going to be 1 minus 0.9901, which is going to be equal to 0.0099. And that's our video on testing a proportion.